Welcome back to Crypto for Christians. We're so glad to be here with you today, and we're very excited to be able to bring more information to you about the cryptocurrency area and blockchain, all wrapped up in a show that's directed towards Christians so we can understand this new technology and be able to benefit from it as we move forward. Now, Alex, you've been talking to us a lot about the social benefits of the blockchain and that technology and what it can do for the world and for us as Christians. So why don't you tell us a little more about that today?
You know, I'd really love to, Rick. This technology is very powerful, and I have a couple of major points that I want to make for folks to understand what will happen as a result of blockchain. And what's most fascinating, I think, for Christians is what could happen or what can happen if the right people get involved and exert influence over the crypto space. And ultimately, that is the real reason that, we wanted to start this channel, is to make sure we get lots of the right people involved early enough that we ourselves can shape what ends up happening as a result of the inevitable implementation of this technology. So first and foremost, the technology itself is relatively simple to understand. What it is not that much more complicated than the internet. The internet is computers talking to each other, and that's pretty simple to understand. The technical details, of course, are very complicated, but anybody can understand computers talking to each other. What was hard to picture back in the early 1990s was the influence that the internet would have in changing all of our lives, to the point where we're interacting with the internet many times a day for everything from watching YouTube to ordering a pizza or calling a car to pick you up. Everybody's using the internet all the time. This has had a lot of positive benefits, and some people have made enormous sums of money as a result of this innovation. And it's nice to see, by the way, that there are lots of Christian websites, Christian videos available. There's all kinds of good material available now on the internet because Christians embrace the technology rather than being afraid of it. Well, blockchain is in some ways simple to understand. Blockchain is a ledger that keeps track of things in a particular way, and it is a way of being very secure in doing that. So unlike other computers that are susceptible to hacking, a good blockchain is basically unhackable. And so the potential social goods begin with that simple idea, that it creates a permanent and unalterable record of transactions that are 100% secure, and no one has the power to erase it or alter it. So even if a big company or a big government wanted to change something on the blockchain, that's not possible with a high quality blockchain because it's stored everywhere at the same time, and it constantly checks in with itself to make sure that nobody's fiddling with it. This unalterable aspect of it is part of its power, and there are benefits that can derive from this. So for example, currently, if you have an idea and you want to prove that you're the first person with that idea, you would apply for a patent, and it takes months. If you're a songwriter and you want to make sure, you would apply for a copyright, and there's a process to that. And all of this works, by the way. The current copywriting system works, but it does take an awful long time. And most people wouldn't know how to even start to go about copywriting something.
Yeah, sure.
And now with a blockchain, you're able to insert something into the blockchain and prove that you're the author of it. And once it's in the blockchain, it's already there. So one of the projects, for example, that accomplishes this is something called Cardano Wall. Now, Cardano Wall is simply a way of interacting with the Cardano blockchain, which is one of the blockchains we'll probably talk an awful lot about because it's designed from the ground up to serve people, especially poor people, which is a theme that we'll come back to. Yeah, we'll come back to that theme about Cardano. It's very, very interesting. Now, make no mistake about it. Some of the people that created Cardano are already billionaires. And Cardano will probably make an enormous amount of money for a lot of people. It is also designed to literally uplift poor people out of poverty and give them first world services. And I will be talking about that. But before I get there, I will mention Cardano Wall, which is simply a way that if you write a song, for example, you can upload the song to Cardano Wall and put your own digital signature on it. And that proves that you are the one that uploaded that song to Cardano Wall. And it's now there. And you could prove 5 years from now, if somebody else comes out with your song and claims to have written it, you can say, well, actually, I wrote it, and here I can prove it to you in a court of law that this song was uploaded to the Cardano blockchain on a specific date and time, and so on and so forth. Now, to some folks who are already involved with copywriting, if you've got the process down very efficiently, you might think to yourself, okay, so I saved 2 or 3 months on the copywriting process. Why does that help me? And the true answer is it might not help you. If you're currently a copywriter and you're already in with how that system in the United States works, or in Canada, or in any developed nation, maybe you don't need Cardano Wall. But Cardano Wall opens up this possibility for all people. Now, that includes you and me, and I don't have the copyright system down very well. But it would also apply to any person, even if they live in a third world nation with no copywriting services at all, with no copyright laws at all. They could still use Cardano Wall because it's essentially free. It's extremely low cost. It costs something like $1 to upload something to Cardano Wall. And just about anybody can do it from any phone, any smartphone, any internet-connected computer could take advantage of that type of a service. So to access it, you can just Google Cardano Wall, and it'll walk you through the steps as to how to do that. And when it comes time to actually do it, at that point, you're not just interacting with the internet, but you're interacting with the blockchain that runs on the internet. And that's how it all works. Now, that's just one example. Another example of the same type of thing where the information is identified as belonging to you specifically and is also unalterable, of course, would be voting. Now, unfortunately, the United States has had an election where not everyone is satisfied with how that election went. And even though we're a developed nation and we have what should be very sophisticated processes, people object to the election. And when the county governments and the city governments and the state governments try to prove to these people, no, this election was not fraud, it was not altered, and they show us the processes that are involved with this voting, every county has a different system. And these votes are loaded in these batches, and they don't seem to be very accurate. And I'm not making any claims about the election. What I am saying is that even in a developed nation like the United States, this is a lousy system. There should be no doubt in anybody's mind about how an election in the United States goes. But because it does not use blockchain technology, it uses a bunch of other disparate technologies, all kinds of different ones in different states. Yeah, because it's not recorded in a blockchain, there's no way to actually prove to everyone's satisfaction that our last election was actually fair. And that's something that I would love to see change. And something that I want all of our viewers to know is that if you ever hear a politician arguing against the use of blockchain technology to secure elections, understand that they are trying to cheat, okay? So they might say things like, oh, well, it's a new technology or it's an unproven technology. Well, it is a newer technology, but it's not that new, and it isn't that unproven. We really do know how it works, and it works in such a way where you could cast a vote and you could go onto the blockchain and make sure that your vote was cast and counted. And you could also find the votes of other people and figure out whether they actually belong to real people or whether they belong to some, whether they were actually generated by fraud. There really is not a way to defraud a blockchain. Everything is recorded and it's all identifiable. And because of that, it would absolutely be possible to run a 100% accurate and secure election on a blockchain. And if the only thing it accomplished was creating a situation where everybody understood that the election result was real, that would be a huge social benefit. And of course, in countries where fraud is a problem, it would make it impossible to defraud an election. And that would be also a wonderful benefit. Another benefit of blockchain is that it provides computer infrastructure for everyone. Now, we don't think about this very much. We each have our little laptops and our cell phones. And what we don't realize is that if we're storing things in the cloud, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram, or whether you're interacting with a larger cloud computing service, anytime you're storing on the Apple cloud or something else, you're storing something in a computer that belongs to a specific company. So that if they wanted to, Apple could delete your information and they would own your pictures if they wanted to. Now, of course, there's a lot of reasons why Apple would not do that. And I do understand that. But in countries like communist China, they have a very close relationship with their internet companies, believe me. And in those countries, everyone's information is owned essentially either by the state or by a company that's very close to the state. And the other thing too is that if you needed a larger infrastructure, if you needed to do more kinds of computing, in our current situation, you would have to buy it. So for example, you would have to purchase, if you wanted to start a website, you would have to purchase web hosting services. And they cost a good bit of money, of course, because they're running on a server that belongs to a company. And the way the company makes money is by charging for that service of hosting your website. It is now possible to host a website on the blockchain. And it has a very small cost that you pay in a small amount of cryptocurrency just for that discrete space on the blockchain that you're wanting to put your website on. And you don't have to go through any companies at all. You just go through the blockchain, and then the only person that owns your data is you. And the only person that can ever alter your website is you. And if you make a company or a government very, very angry, they can't take down your website. You have total control over your own data. And that's a very unique and wonderful thing. What we know, Rick, of course, is that power corrupts, and that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And there really aren't exceptions to this rule. And, if we're going to say that our Christian values matter to us most, above everything else, we want to make sure we have the power. We want to make sure that we have the actual control over our data, over what we're putting out there for others to see. We want to be the ones in control of it, not third-party entities, whether we're talking about Twitter or Facebook or even your web hosting company. We'll feel most comfortable about being able to project our values when we're on the blockchain. And eventually, I'm hoping this show will be on a blockchain hosting service.
Sounds like a great idea.
Well, I really think so. And that's another example of this computer power thing that I'm talking about. So right now, we rely on companies like Hulu and Netflix and YouTube to provide us with entertainment content. And by the way, those companies work pretty well. They're pretty expensive, and they make you subscribe. So you have to pay, whether you watch it once a month or 100 times a month, it's still the same set subscription fee. It is now possible to host videos on a blockchain. And we will be hosting our videos on a blockchain as soon as the leader in that space emerges. And then how it works is that you can just pay a tiny little bit of cryptocurrency for every video that you would like to watch. And that cryptocurrency is just used to create the transaction that allows the video to stream. Nobody profits off of it or anything like that. There's no big profit motive for Hulu or Netflix or anything to host a video. The video is just hosted automatically on the blockchain, and you just use the crypto to trigger the transaction to make it stream.
Sort of like unlocking, in a sense, be unlocking each individual video?
Yes.
That you would unlock?
Well, you can. There are probably a number of different schemes to utilize, and it's also possible that much of it could end up being free. However, nothing is absolutely free ever, and we know that. Right. So it's not entirely free. The costs are much lower, though, because the blockchain doesn't have to employ people. So Netflix employs a lot of people just for running their hosting and making sure that their computer program works. The blockchain works automatically. It just works algorithmically via computer. So the costs of actually accessing the material are lower. Some content creators will basically be asking for a royalty that you pay. So instead of paying 2 cents per video, you pay 4 cents, and 2 of those cents gets put into a crypto wallet that's owned by the video producer.
Okay.
But one of the things that we probably try not to think about when we're watching our videos on our streaming services, but how many of the shows on HBO Max or Netflix or Hulu run deeply counter to your Christian values? Yeah. Now, that's a rhetorical question, and I don't want to talk about any specifics because each of us can make that determination for ourselves, and ultimately it's for God to decide. However, understand that you're paying for all of those shows every time you pay your subscription. And, what I'm picturing is a better world where the better things actually get paid for, and the things that aren't enhancing for people, that don't lead to, safer, more secure lifestyles, more sustainability in terms of our society, those things maybe won't get paid for as much. And I almost believe that, I actually do believe that we can win in a competitive marketplace. I think that, value-friendly programming, family programming can compete very well in a marketplace where people are paying just tiny little bits of money for each thing that they want to use as entertainment.
I mean, that's something that I know many people who recently and over the course of the last year, like you were talking about before, they've quit different social media sites. They've quit various streaming services because they don't want their money going to pay for all of that programming that they don't appreciate and don't want to endorse. And so I believe that's very important for the entire Christian community to understand and to really get behind that, because you shouldn't have to pay for content that you're not going to watch, and you really don't. You would hope that no one would watch ultimately. Right.
Well, and that's exactly correct.
Right. If someone does want to watch it, then they pay for it. Well, you can't stop them, but at the same time, you shouldn't have to fund it, is the way I look at it.
Right. I mean, the system that we have now, basically every subscriber is in a stranglehold, and we're forced to pay for the entire enchilada, even though there's only just a portion of it that, first of all, we want to pay for monetarily. So we are talking about saving money, by the way. So, the idea of paying for each video, suddenly you're thinking, wait a minute, but actually the costs are low enough that it's quite a bit of a cost savings. And then the other advantage is that, it's you determining what you feel comfortable endorsing, as opposed to some executive who lives in Hollywood deciding what he's going to force every subscriber to support. It's a much more egalitarian system. So now what I'd like to do is return to one of the things we talked about earlier in the show, which is the elevation of the poor. Right. So keeping in mind that this was very largely one of the primary, how would you put it, Rick? This was the primary activity of Jesus. This was the primary priority of Jesus. How would you say that? This was his mandate, was it not?
Jesus came to seek and to save those that were lost, and in a sense, we have to recognize that we are all lost. So he came to save humanity, but one of the pieces of that, just like you're talking about, is what goes, hand in glove with that really is the idea of raising everyone's ability to engage on all levels, really, socially, spiritually, and to not be disenfranchised, because that was something that he definitely spoke out against and literally fought against during his life, was the religious leaders of the time saying, okay, we're the ones with the authority. We get to tell you what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. That's what he came to say. No, that's not going to be like that anymore. We spoke about that before on a previous show. And
Right.
so definitely bringing people from a place of being disenfranchised, that is certainly something that we as Christians have been given as a mission to do as well, is
Right.
to bring the entire gospel to the whole world and to say, this is available for you. And that's what we see in so many countries right now. A large percentage of the world's population, it's very dangerous for them to even try to access information about Christianity. Just to
Right.
read a Bible is a very dangerous activity, and they can be, face all kinds of punishment and, even up to death. That
Right.
persecution level, we know that is going to get worse as we continue on moving into the future. We're going to have to fight against as Christians, because we know that is going to happen. We see that happening around the world right now. And so what I believe, and one of the reasons I really wanted to be involved with you on this show, is that if this is a way that we can reach the Christian community and help them to understand ways that we can more effectively reach people all around the world with the gospel, then of course that is more important to us more really than anything else.
Right.
I'll just quote real quickly from Proverbs chapter 11, verse 4 in the New Living Translation says, "Riches won't help on the day of judgment, but right living can save you from death." And that is exactly what you're talking about, that idea of right living. The whole world was changed in incredible ways through the spread of Christianity around the world. And
Right.
now people are actually using those ideas to run counter to Christianity and to try to stop Christians from being able to express their viewpoints and being able to do what we want to do as Christians. And I just, it's incredible, but awful. And so we do want to be able to be effective in the world, continue to be effective, and to not be stopped in our mission.
Well, that's right. I mean, in other words, listen, the concept of equality originated with Jesus Christ.
Right.
And he was the one that made it clear, whether you're Jew or Gentile, whatever walk of life, whether you're royalty or, dirt poor, that the kingdom of God was your inheritance. It was there for you. And the same is true, by the way, for the elevation of women's rights. Were innovative massively during the time of Christ, and then afterward as his mandates were carried out. I want to acknowledge that there actually have been examples of centralized Christianity doing bigoted things. That has happened, and as a Christian, I won't deny it, but I decry it. I oppose it. And I say that any type of bigotry, any type of discrimination, whether it's gender discrimination or discrimination against any group of people, that is not Christian. And getting the true message out is really important to us. We talk about equality. Well, blockchain has the potential of being the great equalizer. And the example that I want to use now is about doing something that Christ would do, which is feed the poor, love the unlovable, minister to them, heal them. We have wonderful, wonderful mission agencies now that carry this out in Africa, for example. My personal favorite is Compassion. And if any of our viewers are interested in, perhaps the best and most effective charity for helping folks in Africa rise out of poverty that's going today, they can look into Compassion. And what Compassion does in a centralized way, in an organized way, is bring ministry and food and health care to specific children that you can adopt through your church. Many of you have probably heard about it, and of course my family does sponsor a Compassion child, and we get a big kick out of it. We think it's just great. Blockchain technology, what it's able to do is bring first world services to people who are in third world situations. And so in a developing African nation, for example, like Ethiopia, the Cardano blockchain has figured out a way to keep education records and healthcare records and identity services and provide that to little kids who are dirt poor in Africa. Even in the most rural settings, those kids would actually have a jump on most Western kids. They get an electronic wallet at an earlier age than my own children got. You know, my kids got bank accounts at about age 16. On the blockchain, you can have a Cardano wallet at age 6. And we don't think of that as being very important in the Western world, but in a world where there really are not modern banking services and there are not reliable currencies, the idea of having a way to transact is really something that can help elevate folks out of poverty. And of course, they can use it to obtain food, they can use it to obtain other things, and their medical records also are stored in a computerized fashion on the blockchain, which we might not need over here, although anybody who's tried to have one hospital send medical records to another hospital will know it can be a real nightmare. And if they're using different programs, there's no guarantee that those things will be compatible. But on a blockchain, any computer can access a good image of a medical record that's stored there. And so this really is a way of elevating those kinds of folks who are in those situations. Now, even more fascinating are the new efforts to modernize education through blockchain. And this utilizes something that gets a little bit technical, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce the concept to our audience because it happens to be a very important one in the blockchain space. So similar to understanding what an app on an iPhone is, that's important if you're going to interact with the internet. I'm going to introduce this concept of an oracle. So an oracle is something that functions in a similar fashion to the blockchain, but it is not a blockchain. It's a different type of program that also lives on a decentralized basis on the internet, in cyberspace. It can't be stopped. All the same qualities as a blockchain, but it isn't actually a blockchain itself. What it does is it responds to requests from blockchains to obtain information and then feed it back.
Okay.
And so I just talked with a researcher last weekend who is designing a program that will be an educational oracle. And what it does is, at your request, it will follow you around at your request. And remember that you're in total control of this data. This data is securitized by you in a way that cannot be hacked. So other people cannot hack into this unless you allow them to, unless you display the information using your own private keys. But what it can do is it can track all of your education, including watching this video, including reading a book that you downloaded, including going to a seminar. It will track everything and keep track of it on a blockchain, so that when you show up to an employer, you can have the employer look at what is this electronically compiled resume of all of your educational experiences that could include, for example, in your case, being a pastor of a certain kind of church for a certain amount of time in a certain geographic location. That might well qualify you to do similar work in a different location.
Right.
And you'd be able to display that like a resume. Now, for those of us in the Western world, we have our degrees and our, professional resumes already, probably saved on the cloud somewhere that some company has control of. But for a kid in Africa or South America to be able to have a resume that's automatically produced, and by the way, is very, very reliable information. It would be almost impossible to fake this. It wouldn't really be fakeable because it would be verified by multiple sources by the Oracle itself. They can show up at a job and say, hey, I'm qualified for this job. Take a look at what I've done and what I've learned. Similarly, if they were to go into an educational course, instead of having to sit through the same 16-week course for everyone, the Oracle interacts with the interactive course so that the course knows you've already had the first 4 weeks of the course in some historical thing that's stored on the blockchain. And so what it does is it modifies the course for you so that first 4 weeks of the course is just a one-day review. And then you get to start in week 5, skip week 9, and you complete the entire 16-week course in 8 weeks because of your prior educational history. It makes education much more efficient and also trackable. That course itself would be loaded onto your education resume, and that would be something that you would use to qualify yourself instead of degrees that are being awarded by very inefficient, extremely expensive, and increasingly untrustworthy, universities that seem to have agendas other than education. This would be strictly about education and would be very, very welcome by also high-tech companies. Tech companies care much more about what you're able to do compared to, what degree you have. And so these kinds of advances are the things that we're looking forward to in the future. And they're so wide-ranging. In other words, blockchain, what I just described, for some people, probably scratching their head going, what? How could that ever be possible? And that would be similar to me saying in 1995 that someday you'll be able to watch every television program ever made on your cell phone. Well, in 1995, I was scratching my head going, wait a minute, how could that be possible? Well, what I want folks to understand is that everything we've talked about on today's show, not only, a lot of it is already possible, and it's just a matter of rolling it out. And then the rest of it, the sky is the limit with what this technology can accomplish. It's really, really different. And I want to admit something now, Rick, that we've talked about some really interesting things. We've talked about how the blockchain could support religious freedom because it prevents, anybody from censoring any kind of communication. It creates 100% secure communications so that if Christians were living in a country where they didn't feel comfortable communicating about God, they could do it on a securitized basis that no one else in the world could hack. Not the National Security Agency, no one ever. And so there's so many exciting opportunities, but I also want to be open about this next fact, which is that the honest truth is I am a crypto enthusiast, but I do not myself know the full implications of this technology. Okay, we've talked about some interesting things today, and all of the things I believe that we've discussed will come to pass. But it's also true that there's many areas that are unimaginable to me because this is a new tech, and not everything about the tech has been explored. Not all of its potential has been explored. So that's part of what's exciting about this.
Yeah, well, if we know anything about technology, it's that it seems to expand and grow exponentially beyond what any one person can keep track of or understand and realize. No one, I would imagine it's easy to say, no one right now knows exactly what all the implications are of the blockchain in 2 to 3 to 5 years. I'm sure there are people who are looking ahead and thinking about all this, but at the same time, someone's going to come along and come out with an innovation that no one had thought of. And
that's right.
That is very exciting. That's another reason why we do want to get Christians involved in this space to understand more about it, and to whether or not we develop it personally. We could certainly find people who have the skills to be able to do that, and if we come up with a great idea about what to do, then we can actually have an influence on where the technology goes. So to me, that's incredibly exciting and a wonderful opportunity for all of us.
It is. Now, what opposes the opportunity are the current centers of power, okay? And so, of course, if you're the owner of Netflix, or if you're the owner of eBay, and you don't want people to be able to do peer-to-peer transactions without interacting with your company's website to take that 5% of every transaction that goes on eBay, if you're the owner of a centralized entity, or if you're the ruler of a centralized government, the last thing you would want to see is blockchain. And so one thing that I want to prepare our audience for is to hear a lot of negative things coming out about blockchain from those centralized entities. Right. So Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. I think it's only a matter of time before the Washington Post starts running stories about the dangers of blockchain or something like this. The big-time authoritarians, the full-time authoritarians in China have now banned blockchain. They're doing everything they can. And interestingly, I'm going to let you know that the biggest reason they're doing that is actually Africa. China has had its eyes on Africa for over a decade now. They have massive investments in Africa. And of course, those investments all come at a price. They'll build roads for an African country and help them develop. But what they want in exchange is to be able to, really rape the land and, get into those natural resources that exist in Africa, probably exploit the people on the way of doing that. And they basically want to extract wealth out of the African nations, without, and they want to, obviously they want to extract more wealth than they're putting in, of course. We understand that. And one of the things that China imports to African nations in exchange for natural resources is the surveillance state. So, nobody spies on people better than the communist government of the People's Republic of China. And what they do is they go to the African governments and say, hey, we'll install spy cameras and the artificial intelligence that runs them so that you can track your political enemies and you can be a warlord in this country indefinitely, as long as you let us, mine the coal or mine the gold or the lithium or the rare earths or whatever it is that the Chinese government is after. And of course, this does not work in the favor of actually any religion. Okay, so religious freedom is anathema to the communist regimes because, of course, they want everybody to be worshiping the state in essence. And so once China found out that blockchain can instantly provide very valuable infrastructure to anybody that has a cell phone in Africa, they immediately shut the whole thing down in China. So they're no longer allowing crypto transactions in China. And what you'll notice is that the opponents of blockchain are actually either oligarchs or authoritarians. These are people who want to retain the control for themselves and do not want to allow the people to have control. And so another reason we want to attract people into the space, encourage people to do research about the space, encourage people to utilize some of the services that will be offered through blockchain, demand blockchain voting in the United States.
Right.
And so it's one of the reasons for this channel is because blockchain can serve as a legitimate check against centralized entities that would subvert the freedoms that we hold dear as free people. And so where I was thinking about ending today is talking about the way blockchain technology will roll out. So it is already a project. The Cardano blockchain has caught on in Africa, and it will continue to catch on in Central America and South America. It creates a massive amount of value in a very, virtually instantaneously, very, very short period of time. And suddenly, boom, every kid has a report card that they can prove is actually real. Boom, every kid can, have a medical record that is functional for any doctor that they go to see. They can even show the record on their smartphone to their doctor. It's hard for us in the developed nations to really become aware of how important something like even those simple things could be to poor kids and poor families across the world. Well, one of the predictions that I saw recently is that blockchain will be adopted early in these undeveloped nations. And then they will start to create efficiencies in the economy. So whereas we have to wait days for certain kinds of transactions to clear and months if you're buying a house, they'll be doing real estate transactions instantly using the blockchain across the developed world. And that this will create so much competitive advantage in those countries that their economies will explode, and that the United States and Canada and the European Union and eventually even China will have to adopt blockchain in order to keep up with the countries that adopt it early. And the same thing is true, folks, for you and me. So early adopters of blockchain, early people into the space, people who are aware of some of the investment opportunities that we'll talk about in future shows, people who are keeping track of this sort of thing and setting some money aside, even if it's just a very small amount of money, to put into promising and morally worthy blockchain projects like the ones we've talked about today. You're likely to have a competitive advantage over people who are not informing themselves. So we really encourage you to not just like and subscribe to our channel, but also to share this video with like-minded folks that you know. If you know some really wonderful people, and it would be wonderful if they got a lot wealthier over the next 5 to 10 years, please do share this video. Turn them on to the possibilities of educating themselves about the next technological wave, and let's all make this world a better place by being a part of the blockchain revolution.
Definitely something we want to do, and we're so excited about it. Thank you so much, Alex, for all of your wealth of knowledge about this and sharing it with us. I know I'm more and more excited every time we meet and talk about these things, and so I'm definitely going to look forward to the next show.
Me too, Rick. Thanks again.